don't see, it's ready. Okay. Welcome, everyone, for our May 21st, 2024 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District meeting. And our first item on the agenda is to call the meeting to order and the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Well, our next item is any public comment. Anybody here that's here for an item that's not on the agenda? I am looking. I think everybody's here for an item on the agenda. So we're going to move on to what's called our public meeting with our Water Resources Management Plan Amendment. This is something we have to do, and I think Emily is going to present.
Yep. Got my handy dandy IT person pulling up something on the screen here. So as you've all been made aware, we have pursued a plan amendment for our Water Resources Management Plan. That process has been deemed a minor amendment by Board of Water Soil Resources, or Bowser. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what is included in that plan amendment, the process, and then there is an opportunity for public comment. This is a public hearing, which is a part of the plan amendment process. So if anyone has additional comments, I'll touch on some of the comments that we've received as well. So in general, this plan amendment process was deemed a minor plan amendment because it is intended really to be an update to include projects and grant references. The intent of the amendments is not to change the focus or priorities of the district, rather just to make it current in the projects we're looking at now. The big impetus for that is to make it eligible for grants, which will support the implementation of those projects. So you can see a whole list of projects that were added to the plan to make it easier to cite in grant applications. There were also a couple of links to grant-friendly words, so you can see those below, such as climate resiliency, equitable actions, linking that any action that's groundwater protection is going to provide drinking water protection as well, and then linking that habitat can provide water quality benefits as well. Those additions received a lot of positive comments from the state agency reviewers, and you can see that in the attachment, the second attachment for the in the board packet for this agenda item. Some other amendments are some clarifications or typos, corrections. So you can see those here. The one highlighted was a new change that was added to this amendment as a result of comments received through Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. They just had some clarifying language of what triggers permitting through them. That was not a material change, just a clarification. We also deleted some references to outdated information, including hyperlinks, which will be changing as we go through the website update process, and some unnecessary water resources management plan language. And then lastly, we did have some changes, tweak some goals to be realistic to industry standards. So previously, our carp population goal was at 30 kilograms per hectare. We amended that to 100 kilograms per hectare. Is just an accepted level that is possible to get to through carp management means. We also updated our article goal from 12 to 7 per year to be realistic with how many news items the district can and has to report on each year. And then lastly, in highlight is another change that occurred since the first version of plan amendment was sent out to reviewers. Our previous legal public notice newspaper was Prior Lake American. that newspaper has ceased to exist during this plan amendment process. And so another new change is to just update in our plan that our newspaper is now Star Tribune. So these are really the summary of the red lines you'll see in the plan amendment. We received a lot of comments back in support of the updates, especially to the grant-friendly language, linking groundwater to drinking water, the habitat connection as well, even some support for, oh great, I'm glad you put that, here's some additional grants that actually link to that. So we're already seeing a lot of support for those. So to give you a review of the plan amendment process, the star indicates where we are at now. So we're pretty far along. We started by working with our board conservationist at Bowser. You all initiated the process, I believe, at the March meeting. I notified all our plan review authorities, so that's this purple box on the side, quite a large list of entities, and then I also notified our partners that we work closely with that are not required plan review authorities. So that's that second group of lists because we wanted review to be comprehensive and transparent. Those reviewers had a 30-day comment period. Within 5 days of that period ending, Bowser did announce that we would follow the minor plan amendment process, and then we printed notices in Star Tribune 14 and 7 days ahead, at least, of this public hearing. So now we are at the public hearing. We can accept public comments at this time, and then after the public hearing, the plan amendment is able to be adopted by the board. You'll see that later in the agenda on today's meeting. If that is done, it'll be distributed. The plan amendment changes will be distributed to the purple box people after that vote has been cast. So without further ado, I can open it up for public comment or questions.
I guess, is there any questions for Emily at this time from the board? I just have one observation. This plan goes to the Board of Water and Soil Resources for approval, and I see on the comment sheet they had no comments. So that's a good sign, I think.
Yep.
So, okay, we'll open it up if there's no more comments from the board. Anybody here in the audience that wishes to speak on this issue at this time? I don't know if we need a motion. Do we need it? It says public meeting. I guess we could open it up. Is there a motion for a public hearing? Second. Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. 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 Okay, so we're opening up the public hearing for this public meeting on this public amendment process. Is there anyone here? We're all good, I think. I need a motion to close the public hearing. Second. Motion made and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, I think that's it for that agenda item. So
Yep.
that was nice and short and sweet. Good job, Emily. I think everybody appreciates the work you've done there. Approval of the agenda is next on the item. I need a motion to approve the agenda, or is there any changes to the agenda from anybody? Nope, nothing from staff. Everybody else is good. So moved. Second by Ben. Any discussion on the agenda approval? Oh, none. Hearing any? I assume you're ready to vote. Approval of the agenda has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. So we're going to go to other, old, and new business, and the first item is programs and project update. And I don't know who's taking this. Jeff?
Yes, I'll take this start here. All right, so the programs and projects update, we'll start with the lake level graphing. As of today, we're at 899.8 and rising. This is up from 898.89 from last month's board meeting. On Spring Lake, the lake level is at 910.94. Within our monitoring and research department, we've begun camp sampling on Swamp Lake. Our contractor, Three Rivers Park District, took spring plankton samples on Fish Lake during what seems to be an annual springtime algal bloom. This was discussed within the Fish Lake Management Plan, and this will be good data and information to help future management actions. We have collected stream flow measurements. Within the ferric chloride operations, we installed the new water level sensor at the weir and installed the new data logger to get the system running autonomously. The system's running smoothly right now. We still have the tank level logger to install. For AIS, our boat inspectors have begun inspecting at our local launches, beginning fishing opener weekend, May 11th. And we're working with the DNR on the final CD3 agreement for locating the unit at the going to be newly refinished Sandpoint boat launch on Lower Prior Lake. Within our aquatic vegetation management program, we have completed treatment of around 59 total acres between Spring, Upper, and Lower Prior Lakes. The treatment of curlyleaf pondweed is to prevent and reduce algal blooms due to curlyleaf pondweed's nature, where it dies off in the middle of summer when the water's warm, and releasing nutrients, which leads to algal blooms. So our effort is to improve water quality through this management practice. Within our carp management program, we have we're working on a mark and recapture study on Upper Prior Lake to define and close the confidence intervals here where the population stands, so we can gauge how close to the goal we are. We tagged approximately 290 carp out of our initial goal of 300, so we're going to expand that goal to try and increase that confidence. We use the panel trap to help capture those 290 carp. We have been preparing for Spring Lake stream removals with the installation of the push trap, as well as gathering movement data through pit stations. We worked with Spring Lake Association to stock bluegill in the desilt pond. 2,350 bluegill were stocked to help predate on spawning carp eggs. So big thanks to Spring Lake Association. Wes is here in the audience. Any questions on these project or program updates?
Any questions from board? Nope, we're good.
Okay, I'm going to touch on the Fish Lake Management Plan update today, and briefly touch on the Prior Lake outlet pipelining. I know we talked about it in the workshop, but I want it to be covered in this meeting as well. So just to refresh our memory on the Fish Lake Management Plan, that plan concluded last year. In synthesis, it found that a long-term solution will require addressing both the excess nutrients found at the bottom of the lake and those running into the lake, otherwise known as external and internal. They gave us a whole bunch of tools to do that and how much work we need to do in each of those areas. And then we discussed a proposed approach for this year, which is really to focus on the nutrients running into the lake from the landscape. So shut off the faucet, if you will, going to the lake. And we picked kind of the lowest hanging fruit projects in that area. You can see those highlighted here. We've got stars for all the projects that have a specific location that were proposed. These two pinker looking ones, pink or orange, would be studies, and then the yellow stars would refer to actual capital projects. And so I just wanted to present on the progress that we've made in the Fish Lake area. So again, we wanted to do some low-hanging fruit projects. Here is a summary on those projects. We've got kind of 3 implementation projects: a field nutrient reduction, a pond improvement near 200th Street, and then a generalized shoreline stabilization or restoration campaign. All 3 of those have had interested landowners so far, so we're making really good progress on those, and it's been very successful so far. Of the studies, the Fairlawn Iron Enhanced Sand Filter study is in italics because to date we don't have an engaged landowner, but definitely not off the table, just not at where the other projects are. We could also pursue this Lake Ridge stormwater study as well. We had proposed that we would choose one of these anyways, so it might tilt towards the Lake Ridge stormwater. And then we still have our ongoing work of carp management and curly-leaf pondweed management. This year we are going to do some increased carp management work. They're trying to figure out where they're breeding, so we're doing some tracking and have installed some pit tag stations out there. There was a curly-leaf pondweed delineation survey done, which didn't find enough growth in April to merit treatment, or at least it wasn't projected at that time. So we'll continue monitoring that over the year. And then as these projects were estimated in the plan, if we were to complete all these, we'd make progress estimated at 64 pounds of reduction. Our watershed reduction goal is 103 pounds. So if we can do that in a year or 2, that's pretty stellar. So just wanted to highlight this area as a real success for the district and a very strong partnership with Spring Lake Township. And as Lisa Quinn mentioned in the workshop, that will be is slated as a focus for our WBIF projects this year. So we're very excited. Another just recap on the PLOC pipelining funding updates. We've submitted 3 funding requests. One of those, unfortunately, was not successful. You can see that here in the table. The capital investment bonding bill. This pipelining project would be a flood reduction project, allow us to get water out of Prior Lake faster during flood times, as well as just maintain the structural integrity of that pipe. So we'll continue to wait to hear for those other funding requests. If they are unsuccessful, we can consider self-funding, re-entering the funding request pool. We discussed that at the workshop earlier, so I won't belabor more. But this is kind of what that timeline could look like, depending on what funding source ends up coming through. We have 2 grant or funding request applications in that are highlighted, and just based on their contracting periods would lead us to construct at different times. So this is kind of a moving target project, but a very important one for the district. So those are my project updates today.
Mr. Manager?
You didn't cover this at all, but it was raining like heck when we were in there. When do we know the change in the lake levels? Because I know we've got newer, faster equipment, et cetera. Just curious.
Yeah, if we're, Manager Boyles, if we're talking about, say, the rise on Prior Lake, we'll get that immediate rise from from the rainfall, and then we'll see rising levels for the next 1 to 2 weeks from this particular event. I don't have an estimate of how much it'll go up, maybe double how much rain falls on the landscape.
Thank you. Just curious.
Any other questions? Board members? Manager Morkenberg?
Yes, so I would also say, so it's good that we track the water levels and that we then are proactive if we see that the water level is starting to get higher, and think about if we should open up the PLOC more if that's necessary, and if we can do that.
Manager Morkberg, thank you. I will take note of that.
Thanks.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, which is the 2023 Annual Financial Audit. And Andy Berg is back to give us an exciting audit report. So take it away, Mr. Berg.
All right, thank you. Keyword exciting, right?
Well,
I'm glad to
you know,
hear that.
Some of us get into numbers, some of us don't, but we'll see.
Right, we'll go from there. Like you said, I'm Andy with Abdo, partner on the audit. Alex, our senior associate's also in the audience. Today I'll go through the presentation covering the 2023 results. I'll look at what our audit opinions were. We'll look at some of the components of the financial statements. We're not going to go through the actual financial statements, but I'll explain what's in there. And then we'll get into some of the numbers of your other funds, your general fund, implementation fund, and then the JPA MOA funds. So the end result is that we issue an opinion on your financial statements. We issued an unmodified or clean opinion, so the best opinion you can get. As part of that, we also issue a Minnesota legal compliance report. We test 7 different areas, anywhere from cash and investing to contract and bidding and debt. So there's a number of different areas there. We did note one item this year that we did report. The watershed district is required under state statute to pay bills within 35 days. We did a sample of 25 and found 4 of those paid past those days. I anticipate that that's already taken care of and will be a non-issue going forward. So now kind of overview of the financial statements, looking at the components of the annual financial report, really broken down into 3 different areas. So the management discussion and analysis, the basic financial statements, and then required supplementary information. Our audit opinion really focuses on the basic financial statements. The management discussion and analysis is a narrative overview of the financial information, also includes some tables and charts in summary form of financial information. The required supplementary information is really related to the pension information. The district does participate in the multi-employer state pension plan, PARA. That gives some additional information on that. The basic financial statements are broken down into 3 different areas: the government-wide financial statements, the fund financial statements, and then the notes to the financial statements. Starting at the left, it's more summary data, getting down into the detailed data. We'll look at what's included in the government-wide and the fund financial statements on the next slide. It gets a little confusing because governments are required to report on 2 accounting bases. The government-wide, which is really the full accrual, and then the fund statements are on the modified accrual. So the government-wide statements are really similar to how businesses report. It considers all funds and accounts of the watershed district into one column. The revenues and expenses are shown as they're incurred, so on the full accrual basis. And then it does include any long-term assets and liabilities, such as capital assets, including the vehicle depreciation, and then the accrued PTO and the net pension liability. The fund statements are, like I mentioned, on the modified accrual, so more the current look. It does separate out your different funds, which we'll look at, so your general fund, your implementation fund, and then the PLOC funds. It's really a focus on that near-term inflows and outflows, similar to the cash basis. There are receivables and payables recorded that meet that definition, typically, within a couple months. And then really is how you look at it through your budget process, so useful to evaluate the near-term financing requirements. So now if we start looking at the government-wide, here's a summary of the watershed district as a whole. So this, again, includes your general fund, your implementation fund, and your PLOC funds. So just point out a couple items here. For your assets, the bulk of your asset is in cash and temporary investments at about $3.7 million. You have other long-term assets, mainly capital assets, at about $1.2 million. Total liabilities at about $725,000, with the bulk of that made up of the current and the non-current. So the current liabilities, which we'll see in the fund statements too, that's about $420,000, and then you have the non-current, so the long-term, the net pension liability, and the accrued compensated absences at about $304,000. So if you combine all that, looking at the net position or the equity portion, that's made up of three different categories. The investment in capital assets at about $1.2 million. You have restricted funds that are in your PLOC funds, so your JPA MOA funds at $343,000, and then unrestricted funds at $2.6 million. So again, that's a summary of the watershed district as a whole. Now we'll break that down by different funds, starting with your general fund. Here we give you a 6-year history of the budget, and then the general fund ending fund balance. The budget is the yellow line. Been fairly consistent over the last 6 years, with a little bit of a drop in 2021. We compare the ending fund balance to that number, which was about 122% at the end of 2023. That number is important because this fund is really funded by the property taxes, which come in halfway through the year. So you would need at least 50% fund balance to meet your cash flow needs. If we look at the activity in the general fund during the year, you had total revenues about $272,000, above budget by about $20,000. Total expenses about $255,000, over budget by about $2,600. So revenues over expenditures about $17,000, which increased that fund balance up to $325,000. So the main activity of your programs and projects flows to your implementation fund. Here we give you a budget to actual of the activity in 2023. You had about $1.9 million of budgeted revenues. They came in at about $1.8 million. So a $43,000 variance, mainly in the grants area. Expenditures were budgeted at just under $2 million. Total expenditures at $1.08 million. Under budget by about $882,000, really in that program and projects area. So total revenues over the expenditures of $733,000. You did transfer out $185,000 for your share of the JPA MOA, so the PLOC funds. Factor all that in, total fund balance increase about $547,000, ending at just under $2.6 million. So the last two funds that the watershed district maintains is your JPA MOA funds. You have the operation funds and the emergency funds. We give you a comparison of the ending fund balance year over year. So the operation fund did increase $118,000. That's really the restricted component we talked about, created by that transfer in from the implementation fund. The emergency fund really remained the same, $260,000. There was some interest earnings that was transferred into the operation fund too during the year. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Okay. Any questions from the managers here? Any thoughts or? It seemed like a good report, other than the one time of payment issue, which is something, well, the way our distance between when we approve the bills and get them out, that's the issue. We'll work on that.
Yep, no, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a common problem with other agencies too.
Yeah, it's not uncommon finding. It's something to be aware of and work to eliminate it if possible.
Yeah. Anything else? Frank, you don't have any comments? No comments?
I was going to ask about one I thought they would cite, but I'm not going to ask. It's typical for small organizations. Never mind.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well,
Thank
good.
you very much for the report.
Good. Thank you, Andy. Good report.
Thank you.
And this is a item to vote on. I believe let me see what the issue is. We have to vote to approve the, let's see.
Accept.
Yeah.
So moved.
Well, I'll mention the motion. Motion to accept the 2023 Executive Government Summary and the 2023 Annual Financial Report and authorize staff to submit to Bowser and the State Auditor's Office.
Just as I would have stated.
Okay, motion by Frank,
Second,
second by Manager Morkenberg.
and if I could just say one thing quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to thank you for doing the audit and for working with our administrator and with our accountants and getting it done, so thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and if there's any more discussion on the motion, on the audit? Okay, I assume you're ready to vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, 5-0. Thank you, guys,
Thank you.
for a good report. Okay, we are moving on to the Swamp Lake Iron Enhanced Sand Filter Easement Approval. And is it, Emily, are you going to handle this?
Correct. I
Okay.
will handle this. If you recall, at the January 16th board workshop, we had a closed meeting and discussed the negotiation of an easement related to Swamp Lake Iron Enhanced Sand Filter. Since that time, I've had discussions with the landowner. We've agreed upon easement language. And so now I am bringing that to the board for approval. You'll see the easement document attached in the board packet. This project would advance a recommendation put forward in the Upper Watershed Blueprint as a project to reduce external loads to Spring Lake. And a feasibility study was conducted to identify this preferred alternative in last year. So this is really the next phase of that project. So without further ado, staff would recommend that the managers approve the Swamp Iron Enhanced Sand Filter Easement Agreement.
Okay, and this is something we've been working on for quite a time, and it's finally coming to fruition, so I think this is, could have almost been on consent, but we'll see if anybody wants to make a motion to approve the Swamp Lake Enhanced Sand Filter Easement Agreement. Moved by Manager Morkenberg,
Second.
second by Manager Boyles. Any discussion on the easement agreement? Not hearing or seeing it? Oh, Manager Morkenberg.
Yes, so do you have any impression of what grant opportunities we have to support the expense?
Yes, we are slated to receive WBIF funding for this project, as well as I intend to submit a grant application for another Clean Water Fund application this summer. So I've been told it's going to be very competitive, and the intent would be to fund the implementation majority through grants. So,
Thank you very much.
Manager Tofinelli.
What happens to this easement if we forego the project?
well, we would hold the easement until we didn't want to. I don't. The power with an easement is that we have the ability to construct a water quality project on it when we're ready.
So then we don't have any deadline for having to proceed with it. We can do it at, I'll say, our leisure.
Correct.
Thank you.
Good questions, good questions. Any other questions or discussion on the motion? Okay. The motion is to approve the Swamp Lake Iron Hand Sand Filter Easement Agreement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. So now, we are at amendment of the easement amendment policy, 4.4. I think I said that right.
President Loney and managers. So the district has been securing conservation easements since 2000. And in 2016, the board approved the easement amendment policy, which would then allow, it kind of defined how the district would go about amending an existing easement within the district. Staff has been working with Scott Soil and Water to inspect the conservation easements, and we've run into several situations where there are some violations of the easement, but the current easement amendment policy doesn't seem to be the appropriate mechanism to address some of these violations. Some of these are very minor and are not detrimental to the overall function of the conservation easement. But once again, doing an amendment to the existing easement doesn't seem appropriate either. So we're developing a new tool, or bringing forward a new tool called an encroachment agreement, which then documents minor encroachments onto conservation easements that are agreed to by both the property owner and the district. These encroachment agreements are then recorded on the property and document what violations the district will allow for the time being, and still allows the district the ability for full enforcement with the requirements of a conservation easement in the future, should we pursue that. So the ask for staff here is to modify our existing encroachment amendment process or policy to include the tool of encroachment agreements within that policy. The policy has been modified to, once again, outline what are the processes and protocols for us to incorporate this new tool called an encroachment agreement. So staff is really asking that the managers make a motion to approve, well, we recommend that the managers approve an amendment to the easement encroachment policy to incorporate encroachment agreements.
Okay, so cover it, right?
Okay. We did discuss this at our board workshop, and I think we were pretty much in agreement on moving forward with this, so I would ask for a motion to, for this item, motion to approve the plan amendment,
So moved.
or wait a minute, that's the wrong one. A motion to the amendment,
To approve the amendment.
amendment to the easement amendment policy.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Manager Tofinelli, motion made by Manager Burnett. Any discussion on the motion by board? Okay, not seeing or hearing anything, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, 5-0. Okay, now we're going to go back to the Water Resource Management Plan Amendment approval, which we had the public meeting earlier, and we didn't get any public comment, so I think, I don't know if you want to do another presentation. You're okay with the one you had? You don't want to make any changes? Thank you. Saving some time here. So with that, we do have to have a approval, motion to approve the plan amendment to the 2020-2030 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Water Resource Management Plan, with changes noted as attached. Moved by Manager Tofinelli. Second by Manager Morkenberg. Beat you.
Fine.
Okay. Any more discussion on that motion? I think we had a lot of discussion earlier and had a good public meeting and wonderful effort by staff. I mean, that had to take a little bit of effort to put all that together. So if I assume you're all ready to vote, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. 5-0. So now we're at the point of the meeting to go to the treasurer's report with Manager Morkenberg.
Thank you, President Loney. The expenditures are tracking with what we would expect them to be at this point of the year. The general fund is at 31% year-to-date of the budget, and the implementation fund is at 10%. The cash that we have available right now is 55% of the budget. We should have a tax remittance that should arrive mid-June, and which will keep us available so that we have more than 50% of our funds in cash. The projected cash flow analysis indicates that we will have adequate cash for the remainder of the year. So that's the cash flow chart, if you look at that. And finally, the cost analysis, that's an alternate approach of summarizing the expenditures of the district. And in general, these expenditures are consistent with our activities. And that concludes my report. Any questions?
Any questions on the report?
Thank you.
I think it's a good report.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're good to go to the next item, which is a consent agenda. And this is item of business, or one item of business. Routine administrative items not requiring discussion can be removed from the consent agenda at the request of a board member, staff member, or member of the audience. So please state what items or items you wish to remove for separate discussion. I would like to remove 6.8 for discussion. Anybody else have any items? No? Okay. Someone want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified? Moved by Manager Morkenberg. Second by Manager Tofinelli. And I think we should read the consent agenda for everybody's information. The items are meeting minutes for April 16th, 2024 board workshop, and also the board meeting of April 16th. The claims list and bank purchasing card expenditure summary, general government's policy amendment, City of Prior Lake office space lease agreement renewal, and resolution 24-381 amending the 2024 budget to reclassify funds in the 509 implementation fund from 637 aquatic vegetation surveys to 611 aquatic vegetation management. And then resolution 24-382 amending the 2024 budget, 509 implementation fund, 648 BMP and easement, inventory, and inspections. With that, all in favor of the consent agenda as modified, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. I did remove 6.8. I just wanted to get a clarification. One, on the scope of services, there's a word called obtubers. I can't even pronounce it. Obtubernance. I don't even know what that is. What is that, Carl?
That's the miscellaneous stuff related to the tank. So the pipes and connections that aren't going to be used anymore.
Oh, okay. Not like appurtenances or anything like that. They're just things that are going to have to be cleaned up when we move the tank. And then the other question I had is, on your summary here, you have a note that actual costs may differ than the estimated task costs, but the project must not exceed the total. So is this a cost not to exceed, or what is it?
We would still invoice the district on an hourly basis for the work that we complete. And if it's under, it's under. This is a standard note from the district's template scope work that, you know, if we were a little over on one task, a little under on one task, we would not still bill above the
Okay,
total amount authorized unless something came up and we came before in advance for a change order or something.
right, there's some assumptions here if these
Right.
change. Okay.
Yep.
So that makes sense. One task could be higher or lower,
Yep.
but the overall total, trying to meet that. Okay.
Yep.
With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the ferric chloride site improvement scope of services. Moved by Manager Tofinelli,
Second.
second by Manager Burnett. Any more further discussion? I don't think there is. Oh, Manager Morkenberg?
Yes, so we were discussing in our workshop the fact that we are going to look at the desiltation pond outlets and also the excavated area in front of the iron chloride plant, which I think are two very good ideas. And I know that our engineer has discussed that in the past as well. Would that be included in this, or is that a separate item?
Manager Markerberg, those would be separate individual work tasks that we would retain the district engineer to assist the staff in that assessment.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. Any other further discussion on anything? Okay. I assume we're ready to vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we are at the upcoming meeting and event schedule, and Manager Boyles, if you be so kind to read?
Am I okay
You're
there?
on. Yes, you're on.
All right. Upcoming meetings are the CAC meeting Thursday, May 30th, at 6 p.m. at Wagon Bridge Conference Room. That's a lower-level conference room in this building. Board of Managers Workshop will take place on Tuesday, June 18th, starting at 4 p.m. sharp in Parkview Conference Room. That's a large conference room on the main floor. The managers then will adjourn to their regular meeting, same date, Tuesday, June 18th at 6 p.m. in this building and room. Then there is a joint managers and CAC tour and meeting Thursday, June 27th, 3 to 5 p.m. for the tour, 5 to 7 p.m. for the meeting, and the location is still under determination. Final item not included is the PLOC Cooperators meeting, which is Thursday, May 30th as well at noon in the Parkview Conference Room again, main floor, large conference room. That is all the meetings I show.
That's great. Thank you, Frank. And at this point, we're ready for a meeting to adjourn. Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Manager Burnett, seconded by Manager Morkenberg. All in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. All opposed, none. We are out of here at 6:51. Thank you, everybody.